Summer can be a bit of a slog. For us, it's often for some reason a rather busy time, and I'm sure we're not alone.
Well, you can beat the summertime sadness and the August angst and enhance your everyday with our excellent sponsor, Via Hemp. This is a company that crafts award-winning premium THC and THC-free gummies.
Each of these gummies is especially designed to cultivate a specific mood. Whether you're looking to get relaxed, get quality sleep, get creative, or just to get focused. If you're 21 or older, you can experience it for yourself and get 15% off your first order with our exclusive code MSheet at viahemp.com. That's VIIAHEMP.com.
I personally enjoyed their grapefruit flow state gummies. This CBG and CBD powerhouse really helped me tap into my productivity. Like, we have had an extremely busy summer, and I feel flow state got me over the finish line a few times when I was editing multiple episodes a day, digging through documents, and knocking out a bunch of interviews.
Via Hemp does not require a medical card, and it ships legally to all 50 states. It's also affordable, and even more so for Murder Sheet listeners who get a special deal.
If you're 21 and older, head to viahemp.com and use code MSheet to receive 15% off. That's VIIAHEMP.com and use code MSheet at checkout. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Enhance your everyday with Via.
Temp check. What kind of summer are we having this year? A family road trip summer? A beach bum summer? Or a wake me up when the sun sets summer? With Instacart, choose your own adventure and skip the shopping side quests. Where available, you can get ice cream delivered to your hotel, sunscreen to the pool, or cold brew to your bed. Well, door, in as fast as 30 minutes. Wherever you find yourself this summer, you can get the goods. Download Instacart for free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum $10 per order. Excludes restaurants. Additional terms and fees apply.
Achieving a gorgeous grin from home isn't a total mystery with Bite Clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all of your sleuthing friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
Content warning. This episode contains discussion of violence and rape.
It's truly a scene out of a nightmare. A couple in bed, roused from slumber. A voice in the darkness. The voice makes threats. The voice addresses the couple by name. The voice commands action. The man and woman lie there, confused, terrified. The woman is instructed to zip tie her partner. Then she herself is bound. Taped-up swim goggles are pulled over their eyes. They are both forced into the closet, then separated, made to hop to different parts of the house.
The invaders put on a professional facade. They indicate they've done all of this before. They have a routine, protocols. It's just business. But there's been a mistake, the couple is told. A case of mistaken identity. Still, the woman will need to be abducted so the invaders can secure a ransom and make the operation worthwhile.
The man will be left behind to facilitate payment. The invaders set up a camera on the wall to observe him, to ensure the man is not contacting the police or running for help. The woman and the man are both forced to consume drugs to knock them out.
The man lies on the couch, still zip-tied, listening as his partner is driven away. Then he fades back into a drug-induced sleep.
Again, that sounds like a nightmare. But that was the reality that Aaron Quinn and Denise Huskins awoke to in the early morning of March 23rd, 2015. That was when these 2 young physical therapists were attacked in Aaron's home in Vallejo, California. They were bound and blindfolded, drugged and threatened. Denise was kidnapped. Aaron was left behind to get the ransom. The following day, overcoming his fear of causing harm to Denise by going to law enforcement, Aaron freed himself and contacted authorities.
Instead of offering help, the Vallejo Police Department accused Aaron of murdering Denise. They grilled him hard. They did not appear to investigate other angles. They seized his phone and put it on airplane mode, ignoring messages from the kidnappers. Messages that could have pinpointed exactly where Denise was.
Because, of course, Denise wasn't dead. For those 2 days, she was held in captivity by a mysterious man who claimed to be part of a shadowy black market company. That man raped her. Then, Denise was released in Huntington Beach, California, over 400 miles away from where she was taken.
That still was not the end of the ordeal for either Aaron or Denise. The Vallejo Police Department and agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation proceeded to double down on treating them both like suspects rather than victims.
And the media eagerly ate up the false story of two hoaxsters emulating Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl novel, which had recently been made into a popular film. The narrative of a beautiful woman pretending to be a victim while actually acting as a manipulator was simply too enticing for many journalists to pass up on, especially when they could squeeze in a reference to a hot fictional story in the headlines and chirons.
All the while, Aaron and Denise were left to deal with their trauma while under a cloud of public suspicion and legal threats from law enforcement. They made it through by sticking by one another. They also received the support of determined lawyers like Dan Russo, Amy Morton, Doug Rappaport, Lauren Schweitzer, Jim Wagstaff, Ken Nabity, and Kevin Clune.
Both of their families stood by them, and Aaron's FBI agent brother even helped them navigate the complicated legal wranglings.
A newly minted detective named Misty Caruso, who worked at the Dublin Police Department in Alameda County, conducted a dogged investigation that led to some vindication. She found that a disbarred immigration attorney named Matthew Mueller had kidnapped Denise, and that he had attacked other women and families as well.
Ultimately, Denise and Aaron would get $2.5 million from the Vallejo Police Department for defamation. Still, this never should have happened to them. What Denise and Aaron went through represents not only an egregious failing of law enforcement, but unfortunate systemic issues that can conspire to harm victims and punish the innocent.
This case is currently getting talked about thanks to the new Netflix docu-series, American Nightmare. After you've watched that, you need to read the book, Victim F, From Crime Victims to Suspects to Survivors. This is the book that Aaron and Denise wrote with Nicole Egan. A book is going to be a different experience than a docu-series, one that allows for more details and nuance. I think it should be required reading for members of law enforcement agencies to drive home the perils of jumping to conclusions.
In the realm of law enforcement, skepticism is prevalent. Perhaps that's even necessary. People do tell lies, sometimes outlandish ones. But what I'd call a healthy skepticism should never override basic compassion, curiosity, or the strong impulse to corroborate information and check the facts. When you read Victim F, you realize that law enforcement got it into their heads that Aaron and later Denise were the enemies. Instead of simply digging into the evidence before forming definite conclusions, they let their initial assumptions carry them to a place where they smeared and harassed people who had already been through a major trauma. The investigative process should always be about following the facts. What does the evidence say? Where does it lead? Had police done that immediately, Denise would have likely been rescued, and she and Aaron would have never had to go through the public shaming they received in the months and years after the abduction.
We were fortunate enough to get a chance to interview Denise and Aaron recently. We talked about American Nightmare and Victim F. We discussed what they went through, the details like the lead FBI agent's massive conflict of interest, their theory on possible other perpetrators, and big picture changes that they want to see law enforcement take on to minimize harm and the possibility of wrongful convictions.
My name is Anya Kane. I'm a journalist.
And I'm Kevin Greenlee. I'm an attorney.
And this is The Murder Sheet.
We're a true crime podcast focused on original reporting, interviews, and deep dives into murder cases. We're The Murder Sheet.
And this is Under Suspicion, Denise Huskins and Aaron Quinn on trauma, injustice, and surviving their American nightmare.
I'm Denise Huskins. I'm first and foremost a physical therapist, but I am also a survivor of a kidnapping and multiple sexual assaults. In March 2015, my husband and I woke up to a nightmare. I was kidnapped and held in captivity for 2 days where I was continuously drugged and raped. And Aaron went to the police for help, and they just made the nightmare that much worse. They refused to look at evidence that could have rescued me, and they just tried to get Aaron to confess to my murder. I was thankfully released, but as soon as I spoke to the Vallejo Police Department, they said they didn't believe me, went on national news to call us both hoaxers. And news outlets across the world called me the real life Gone Girl. We lived under that for months, and nothing was done to find kidnappers. And the one who held me captive attacked another family and was caught by a different police department, where they did their due diligence and linked their case to ours. And that's when the truth finally came out.
Yes, and I just want to say, anyone who's watched American Nightmare needs to read Victim F, and that's the book you did together about this just harrowing experience, because it goes into such detail, and I feel like by speaking out, you're empowering other people to come forward with their stories and to understand that the police can get it wrong, and the police can get it extremely wrong and actually re-traumatize and re-victimize people in situations like this.
Right. Well, thank you for suggesting for people to read the book, because it was really important for us to take our trauma back. We were silent for 3 years because we were trying to respect the legal system, even though we were completely disrespected by it. But we were waiting for the criminal trial, the civil case that we had against the city of Vallejo for the defamation that they did. And in our silence, the narrative was taken over by anyone and everyone filled in the blanks with whatever their own beliefs and biases were. So we really wanted to clear things up and show it from our perspective, and from both of our perspectives, because Aaron and I both lived separate but the same trauma side by side one another. So we, in our book, take it from the beginning and just lay it out and let the readers live and experience it with us. And really try to put them in the situation with us. Really, for us, the biggest mystery was why the police believed what they believed and then handled it the way that they did. Of course, in a film docu-series that is in the true crime genre, there's still going to be that very much twisty, turny, did she thing, which gets people really enthralled and keep viewing. And in the end they showed the important themes that we wanted people to come away with, of the victim blaming and police misconduct, the misrepresentation in the media, but I think it also does, just by the nature of a 3-part docuseries, that leaves out a lot of really important details that can lead people to again come up with their own conclusions. So I think, of course, it from our perspective, it'd be really helpful for people to read the book to fill in those gaps.
I love what the book does with getting both of your perspectives in there, but also that of your families, like reading what they were going through while all this is happening. So I feel like I came away with a really strong overview of this from multiple perspectives, and it forces you to think about the situation from the perspective of both of you, the people in it, but also, what your parents are going through, what everybody, your siblings, just the incredible trauma. And I guess, how were you able to sit down and unpack that together as you wrote that out?
Well, the book took us about 3 years to write. We had the benefit of processing through this with our lawyers or civil attorneys in the case. And then we had a great co-author, Nikki Egan, who really empowered us to write our perspectives in our words and then just help us shape it. So she acted very much as almost like our daily editor, and just ask questions on how to go kind of to the next level of that. And so we basically started off writing almost as a journal. We had a basic outline of how we wanted to frame it. So we put it into 3 parts of from victims to suspects to survivors. And we had written that down on a napkin at a restaurant. And then we went from that framework of showing us our perspectives side by side, making sure the timelines match up. And it took just a lot of effort and a lot of editing, because there's so much going on that to get a cohesive narrative is the biggest challenge. And generally for myself, when I would write a chapter and it would make me feel a little sick if I read it, I figured I was kind of right on in the right ballpark. That's basically, I was like, if it makes me get like the weird sweats and stuff that happens when you're stressed, then I'm kind of in there. And that's the primary goal, is to try, as Denise said, give people some perspective of what it's like to live through that, and hopefully bring awareness to that, those situations. Because if you see a headline, you don't actually know all the story, and you really don't know everyone's story. But we see headlines, and it's easy to rush to judgment and make decisions on that. I think when you start seeing more of the details, you start to realize how misleading those headlines are, or how misleading the police were. Because one of the questions, like, why did Aaron act this way? Why did Denise act this way? I think we lay out pretty clearly that we're trying to do the best we can in that situation. And I would say we did quite well.
So yeah, I would certainly agree. And I will just say that, like, I mean, I want to unpack some of the big themes in the book that as it came up. And you mentioned the idea of jumping to conclusions based on headlines or based on assumptions. And I wanted to talk about specifically, the idea that when a woman is harmed, oftentimes it's the boyfriend or the husband. I mean, like, there's stats to bear that out, but I think you wanted to ask about that.
Yeah, and reading the book, it was really clear how you, Aaron, were affected by that and by that perspective. And I was just curious, what does it feel like to be the target and the focus of that suspicion when the person you love more than anyone else in the world is missing?
Yeah, it's really difficult to describe what that feels like, because unless you've experienced it, you don't know. And the police, unfortunately, are trained in this, and this is a strategy they use. And it's fairly classic Reed technique that Detective Mustard and Agent French were using, and that is to psychologically pressure you into a confession. And is an effective technique to get confessions. The problem is it's also an effective technique to get false confessions. And they did not look at any objective evidence. It's just Denise was missing, and therefore she was dead. But that could also rely on a kidnapping. If she's missing, she's kidnapped. The big issue when officers are trained like this is that they believe they are human lie detectors. And Mustard decided from the get-go, this is what's happening. And every information funneled through him, and he just gets confirmation bias, and then they just pound you hour after hour, regardless of how many times you say, I didn't do this, regardless of the evidence. And you start questioning yourself, because you're alone, cold, in prison clothes. You've been traumatized. There was moments where I actually thought maybe I had a psychological break. And for me, the question gets asked, like, why didn't you ask for an attorney earlier? I didn't want it to inhibit the investigation by any means. So I think asking for an attorney, that's going to delay things. And my goal was to find Denise. Unfortunately, at a certain point, I just go, well, I need to ask for an attorney because they're just not stopping. And that is the scary part, because this is not the exception of this case is not what the police did. This is like standard operating procedure. The exception is like how much I was able to tolerate, because most false confessions happen between 4 and 6 hours, and that we were proven innocent in such a short period of time. So often these false accusations or wrongful convictions happen, and it's decades later that, if ever, that people are exonerated, and we were in a few months. So that is a truly scary thing about all this. What the American Nightmare doesn't cover is that my brother's an FBI special agent that we go into the book. So they're doing it to me as a upper middle class, highly educated white person with a brother as an FBI special agent. What are they doing to other people? And it is a tremendous, tremendous amount of pressure on you. And and you just want to stop. So I understand why people would falsely confess. You think, I confess, they stop, and I'll fix it later. But unfortunately, you cannot fix it later. And on the last note about that, where it's like they went, Denise is missing, it's always a boyfriend, it's always a significant other. My understanding is about 80% of the time that's the case. So unless these detectives are working mass numbers, they are getting a small sample size, and they don't get trained in thinking that. So that's basically 1 out of 6 times it's a stranger abduction, and there was evidence to support the stranger abduction. So they're making, I don't understand what they get trained in their decision making. That's just really scary because they have so much power.
Aaron went into it knowing that he would be considered a suspect. He just didn't think it'd be the only suspect. And as he told them what happened, and there was a camera and there was evidence in the house that matched what he was telling the police, he figured, okay, I just need to tell them the truth, and they'll realize that I'm not a suspect. But the sad part is they didn't evaluate the evidence. They didn't monitor his phone, even though Aaron said that the kidnappers were going to call. There's so many things that they could have seen early on that he was in fact a victim, just put their blinders on and chose not to.
That is a truly terrifying aspect of the story, is that it's not just that they scrutinized you, it's that it just seemed like any other input that was coming in that contradicted the idea that you were, lying, was just dismissed out of hand, which is pretty shocking.
This episode is sponsored by AutoTrader. Credit scores, down payments, interest rates. Car buying can be a numbers game, but you don't have to be a math expert to get the keys to your dream car. Just use Kelley Blue Book My Wallet on AutoTrader. Crunch your numbers and get your personalized results so you know exactly how much you'll pay each month for your car. It's like having a magic wand for your wallet. Presto! The car you've been wanting is now within reach. So hit the road and leave your calculator at home. Find your next car on autotrader.com.
What makes a life a good one? Is it the adventure you have? Or the friends you find along the way? Maybe it's pursuing your passion while striving to protect, defend, and save what you believe in every single day. So what makes a life a good one? In the Coast Guard, we think it's all of the above and more. But you'll have to find out for yourself. Visit gocoastguard.com to learn more.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was in terms of, we kind of touched upon this, but just in terms of, Denise, your captivity, would you be willing to share some details about that, and specifically around what the kidnapper Mueller told you about the organization that he was allegedly working for?
The whole time in captivity was a lot to try to manage in the position I was in, because, being put in the trunk of a car, drug, told I'm going to take you 48 hours, not knowing exactly the details. He didn't tell me exactly what he was asking of Aaron. So I didn't really know what this was all about, other than he told me that it was intended for Aaron's ex. And it was very elaborate, very planned out. And even in the home invasion, he would say things encouragingly like, you're doing a good job. This isn't your fault. So it was confusing for me because I don't know, never been in that situation. You think they're going to act violently and aggressively, and it was very procedural. So, I'm taken to an unknown location and he says things to me like, I don't want to dehumanize you. I'm sorry, this wasn't meant for you. I got this wrong. I got the wrong intel. I was in charge of that. We're a group that was organized as kind of a black market startup company that can be hired to fulfill financial or personal debt. So we were hired by someone. I don't know who hired us, because I'm the one in charge of watching over the captive. And I, just in case I decide to back out, I can't give you any information. And tells me because it wasn't intended for me. He didn't have any collateral against me to ensure I won't speak to police. So then that's what he tells me is the decision of what he says needing to have sex with me. and record it. So he tells me a lot of things about the organization that he's a part of. He tells me that he was in the military, that he had psychological issues, can't lead a normal life. This is his way of supporting his family. It was very overwhelming, and I didn't really know what to do with it. I knew that there was, truth in what he was saying, because some of the stuff that he's saying matched what I was living and experiencing. And I knew that some of it was lies or fabrications to make all of this even more terrifying and chaotic and lead me to not fight back. But at the time, it didn't matter what all the details were to me. I just needed to figure out how to get out of there alive. And it felt like he wanted to talk. He wanted me to listen. I felt like he was very on edge. Like if I fought back, that was partly what he wanted from me, to subdue or submit a screaming woman. So I just was like, okay, he's trying to psychologically manipulate me. It's like playing a game of chess, and I don't know what the rules are. It's all on him, and I'm just kind of taking each moment by moment. So I just felt like I needed to listen to him, and in a way, psychologically manipulate him back, to let him trust me that I'm not going to fight back. If he doesn't think that I'm going to fight back or scream, then maybe he will release me. So it was a constant game of trying to figure out how the hell do I get out of this alive. The thing about all the details he said about the organization that he was a part of, it was consistent with what he told Aaron, what was in the pre-recorded messages that was played for Aaron, what he said to me, and then what later the kidnappers had put in the email to then, say that this was all real. So there was enough consistencies that I think there's some truth to parts of it. But as far as it being like an organized, sophisticated thing, I don't think it's quite sophisticated at all, because he should have been caught first day, and he made a lot of mistakes.
They had all these procedures, and that's a way to limit your own personal responsibility.
Right.
I'm just following the rules, even though they made up the rules. And you can see that even the police, they follow certain chains of command, and you do need rules, but then it takes away from your own personal responsibility, because I feel well, the system's set up this way. They set up these procedures to limit their own self-guilt. And then I believe most people think they're the good guy. So he tried to manipulate certain situations. Well, I'm not as bad as the other guys. Well, I'm not as bad as this, despite doing horrific acts. Or after Denise's release and the police say it's a hoax or a fabrication, I wasn't actually surprised that the kidnappers wrote emails. One, they wanted credit, and two, they viewed themselves as not, as gentlemen, as they said, gentlemen criminals. So they didn't want to be as bad as they thought they actually were. And that's why they're so dangerous. It's a rationalization and a lack of accountability, and that they actually are patient criminals, which police do not catch patient criminals. And that's why we advocate for at least Mueller to be sentenced to life, and why we keep reiterating that we know there's at least two other people, because they're dangerous and they will do it again.
Absolutely. That's one of the most infuriating things to read about some of the emails, the self-congratulatory tone of this group and of Mueller. And just it almost seems like a manipulation tactic on top of everything. Like, oh, look, we're doing things in a professional way. We're not like other criminals, so just comply, essentially. It's it's creepy.
So you don't believe he acted alone?
No.
We 100% know there's other people, and we detail that in the book. But when we're upstairs in the closet, I hear people rummaging through my kitchen drawers. Someone else is using a drill. Denise saw other people legs walking. The reason
walks by me. There's a car that pulled up to the house when I was in captivity, and doors opening, whispering. He couldn't drive a car and be in the house at the same time. So it's just, the thing that's frustrating about all of it is that there was no follow-up by investigators once Mueller was caught. They found a dummy and found recorded messages that they had played for us, that we had told them that they had played for us, but that wasn't why we thought there was more people. All these other reasons were why. But they never bothered entertaining that, and even told me they were 98% sure that he acted alone before they even went through his electronic devices. So again, they made a decision. And when I was interrogated by the FBI at the end of that, Dave Sesma told my attorney that he was 99% sure that I was lying and I was Gone Girl. So now they're 98% sure that he acted alone. It's like, I think I even told him, like, enough with this percent stuff, like trying not to cuss at him, but just show us the facts. Let us know. How do you know? And really, there was no, other than them saying like, oh, well, he was kind of a loner. Yeah, he lived with people. He got married the day that he was sentenced for our crime. He had family. Like he had a lease with someone on Mare Island. Like, how much of a loner can you be? It's just, anyways.
And it wasn't in the books, we found out later, but Mueller has told us that there's other people and he's afraid of them. And so he's afraid of what they would do to his family. So he also tried to use basically an insanity defense, and you can't have co-conspirators and use an insanity defense. So it behooves him to say, I did it by myself. And he's also, as far as I understand, you don't want to be known as a snitch in prison. And he's also known as a rapist. So probably there's no real reason for him to do it. And it's just, to Denise's point, it's the same investigators that said, I killed Denise, who put my phone in airplane mode, did nothing about it. Then they said it's a hoax, did nothing about that. Now they go, he acted alone. So they're like, their trustworthiness is in the gutter. And so it's unfortunate we can't get the answers, but we have also seen other leads that just weren't followed up.
The fact that Mueller dropped the name of Aaron's ex, and was that ever dug into about how he even got that name or what's going on there?
What the FBI rationalized was it was simply a case of mistaken identity, was stalking us, originally stalking her, got her name, and that was it. Which could be true. Why he kept going with it is the other question. Especially, I could kind of understand maybe in captivity going along with it to somehow manipulate situation with me. But then even further in the emails to say over and over again, yes, this was intended for her. I'm not going to say why. It just, really the emails were an opportunity for them to kind of say we manipulated the situation and kind of give themselves more credit. So, it's just the unfortunate thing that we just don't have the power to investigate it further. And it's a big question.
And on top of that, we just know that aspect has never been looked at. So they haven't investigated that more than just he's a sexual predator and that's it. And I agree that he's a sexual predator and he can be other things, but these are very concrete thinkers who lack any sort of mental flexibility. And they also rather have this case be closed and contained because it was a catastrophic failure at every level and only Misty Caruso saved them. So they want to take credit for it and then wrap it up. And because they care about protecting themselves more than they care about protecting the public. At least they have shown that in this case.
Well, and the fact too that she was the intended target and has had a prior relationship with the lead FBI agent who was handling their case, it gives reason to believe they didn't want to explore that because it makes his conflict even more egregious, where they're attacking and going after Aaron justifying it, saying it's always the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend, someone involved intimately in their life. Well, by that standard, he too should be ruled out as a suspect. So who's ruling him out? Himself? So that's where it gets really murky and makes you wonder, like, okay, well, maybe it just wasn't explored because he just wanted to not be involved.
Yeah, can you talk a bit about the relationship between the ex and the FBI agent investigating the case?
Yeah, so my ex was previously married before her and I started dating. As far as my understanding of the end of her relationship is that she had a sexual relationship with Agent Sesma, who is the lead case agent, and that was a catalyst for her marriage ending in divorce. And then at some point, apparently, Agent Sesma tried to rekindle their relationship when her and I had been dating for a few months. She supposedly rebuffed those advances, but she's an unreliable narrator. So obviously, his relationship is far more issue than anything else, and it clouds all his, like, that decision clouds every judgment going forward. So we can't trust anything that he did because he's making a decision like that. And on top of that, he's required to disclose his conflict of interest. So we don't know if he actually did that to his supervisors. If he did, either he diminished their actual relationship, or if he said the whole truth, those supervisors said that's okay for him to say on this case. And this is another part about the tragedy of this, is that it's a whole criminal justice system. So people will see Agent Sesma, they'll see Detective Mustard and be infuriated, and they should. They're the point leads. But there are supervisors above them that should be being the guardrails and deciding, hey, why is this guy on this case? Agent Sesma has no special skills to be on this case. It could be any agent. And then so his perception of conflict of interest, or his actual conflict of interest, ruins their credibility and ruins the credibility of the investigation of the case. And that's what's ultimately really frustrating, because we've reported this to supervisors. We told people, hey, this is a problem. Everyone said it's okay. Or as Doug put in American Nightmare, they told them it was, quote, unproblematic, and it is obviously a massive problem.
Yeah, I it's funny, like in the true crime space, I feel like the FBI is often looked at, maybe in some cases rightfully so, as like the adults in the room, and there's kind of that prestige, right? And I mean, your brother's an FBI agent, so I think, you probably had that too going into this. But I thought it was really interesting, Denise, your attorney, Doug Rappaport, at one point, when you were like, oh, the FBI is getting involved, that's great. And he was kind of like,
yeah.
I mean, kind of like, wow, he was kind of on the money there. What happened with the FBI here? How has that altered your perceptions? And like, I mean, I don't know, it's just shocking. What are your thoughts on that?
For me, when I was in interrogation room, they told me the FBI is involved. I was excited because I know my brother, and my brother is one of the smartest people I know. And I know I met his colleagues who are incredibly intelligent, the type of people that you view as FBI agents. Now, not to say that the case agents aren't intelligent, but they also had blinders on, tunnel vision. But it's scary to think, because you expect the FBI to be better, but they just jumped on the bandwagon. So they acted the same, just with a different badge. And what people need to understand, there's usually two case agents, and all information goes to them. So you can have other FBI agents going through computers, collecting evidence, doing their job, but then it's the case agent's decision on what's important and what's not. And so that all funnels down to Agent Sesma and Agent Walter in this case, Agent Sesma being the senior and the lead investigator. So he is the end point of all this information. So he just jumped on board with it. And again, that's what's really scary. And that's part of why his attorney Doug was like, is it a good thing that they're involved? Because he has seen them railroad people, and they're the FBI. So if the FBI says something and it's a person going like, that's not true, what are people going to believe? They're going to believe the FBI agent.
Aaron, you've mentioned a couple of times that your brother is actually an agent of the FBI. Can you talk about that and the role he played in supporting you and helping navigate you through this whole difficult process?
And this is part reason why Denise and I don't feel obligated to keep sharing and bringing awareness, is that we are the lucky ones out of this, where we're not in prison. We're alive. We're together. We had the ability to pay for high-level criminal defense attorneys. I mean, we spent $140,000 on criminal defense attorneys, and we weren't even charged with a crime. And I have a brother who could be a resource to help us navigate this and give us an understanding of what is going on. And I mean,
what's protocol? What should have happened with a kidnapping? Like, should I have my name been out there as soon as Aaron went into report, or should they have been trying to communicate with, things like that, where it's just like, is this normal? And yeah, so it was really helpful to get a better understanding of what it should be, what it shouldn't be, and then how it actually is.
And even just going through the legal system, I could call my brother and go, what does this mean? I mean, when you read any sort of legal document, he's also an attorney, so he could explain what are these procedures, and just to have that information, because fortunately as victims, they just treat us like a problem. We didn't have many people to go to for, like, what is a preliminary hearing? What are these things that if you're not in the system, you don't really understand? And try not to get emotional. It was a really, really hard time for him as well. And so I'm internally grateful for, like, his support throughout this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the bonds between you and your families, like, really come across in the book, especially of, like, stepping up to help you. I mean, just the fact that you were victims of a crime and then had to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to basically, prove that, or have attorneys advocating for you, is just so appalling. But the fact that your families were behind you just really comes across in this work. I wanted to ask you about the attorneys in this who kind of helped you through this process. How has this sort of impacted how you view the importance of having legal representation when you're dealing with law enforcement, even in a situation where, frankly, you shouldn't need it?
Well, it's a must. Absolutely. If we speak to law enforcement for whatever reason, we're calling our attorney. And it's sad to say that I think we should, and anyone should, because you do really need a ref in the room. You don't realize until you're in that situation, or even afterwards, that police are legally allowed to lie to you. And that's part of the Reed technique. They call it a ruse, or whatever name you want to call it. A lie is a lie, but they do it in a way to manipulate you, or to manipulate the situation. And, even the lie detector test, it's been proven to not be scientifically backed up, but they still use it. When I walked in with Doug, I overheard him speaking to law enforcement about, we want to have her take a lie detector. In the back of my head, I'm like, okay, I can do that. And he's like, absolutely not. Are you joking? And kind of laughed at them and was like, no, thank God I had him with me, because seeing how Aaron was treated, seeing, on other documentaries and things afterwards, how victims of sexual assault are treated and interrogated and then charged with a crime. I mean, I don't know, emotionally, psychologically, in that position after 2 days of captivity, what I would have done, said, believed, after, if I didn't have an attorney there, just to make sure things went how they should be going.
And also on top of that, to have someone keep record. Like,
yeah,
my interrogations were recorded. I had to fight to get a recording of Denise's interrogation by Mustard. The FBI won't turn over question by SESMA. And what the laws are saying is that if the police write a report, you don't need the video. And we have read through the police report, and people might find it shocking. Mustard lies in the police report. And so you have, again, if you were in a suit, a civil suit or in a criminal suit, it's your word versus a detective, and the detectives know how to shape the narrative to get a conviction. So you need an attorney to be like, I kept these notes. This is what actually happened. So you can at least have some sort of counterpunch, because the system is is overwhelmingly in the favor of the prosecution and the police. Is not a fair fight.
Absolutely. Speaking of law enforcement, I did want to single out Detective Misty Caruso. Can you speak about what her involvement in this meant to you and what it was like getting to meet her eventually?
As soon as you bring up her name, I have to hold back tears. Oh, yeah. At the time when Mueller was caught, I wasn't really reading a lot of reports on anything because I just couldn't handle it. So I didn't know the details of exactly how he was connected and even that it was a woman that connected the case. And, we were just trying to get our lives back together. But it was a couple years later, after Mueller was sentenced federally, that she reached out to our family and she said that she would like to meet with us if we were open to it. And I immediately just broke down because that whole time, in captivity, I'm imagining SWAT team breaking down doors and saving me and rescuing me, or at least, getting some kind of empathy from law enforcement as I'm recounting the details of my rapes and just something different. So then to finally have someone in law enforcement that I didn't just think, but I could really call a hero was just, can't even describe how important that was for me, for both of us. And then talking to her and learning more about what she did and what she went through. We met with her and her husband, who's also in law enforcement, and hearing the tireless nights that she was up trying to figure this out, and the pushback that she got from some colleagues of you're spending too much time on this, forget it, we got the guy, let's move on. And she's like, no, there's another victim out there. There's just, yeah, I mean, we owe our lives to her. I can't thank her enough.
You talk about how the police have been out there breaking down doors, doing everything they could to help you. And of course, ultimately what they did was they lied about you and defamed you. And you actually filed a lawsuit against them. Can you talk about the suit and what it was like to fight that battle?
It was scary to file a suit because there are laws. The laws benefit the police dramatically. And if we had lost the suit, we would have to pay the police legal fees, and that's hundreds of thousands of dollars that you can't have. So it's a big risk to do that. But it's also important because they shouldn't be allowed to do just anything. They don't have immunity from everything they do, and we knew that they were just making it up, and they ruined our reputations, made us pariahs in the community, and made the community unsafe. Everything they did hurt everyone and only helped themselves. And then when we're doing the civil suit, they continue to attack us. They asked if they wanted in discovery every communication that Denise and I had with Mueller up to 6 months prior to the home invasion.
Which there is none.
Which obviously there's none. And it's maybe it's standard. They can go, hey, it's standard discovery just in case. But at the same time, they said they investigated this fully. So if we had communications with Mueller, wouldn't they actually have evidence of that? And then during our civil case, we find out it's shockingly bare what they actually did. And later on, we find out they actually destroyed evidence. So they play by a different set of rules. And it was encouraging to have a judge, Judge Troy Nunley, rule in our favor to see someone, to actually see the system work in some way, a judge to objectively evaluate the evidence, and his ruling was damning for the police and hopefully helpful for people going forward, to help restore a little bit of our faith into the system, that there are guardrails, but man, it takes like that level. That is again, that's why we say we're the lucky ones. We actually get to push back and do these things that many victims of this do not.
Well, and the only reason we were able to do a civil suit is because they went out and defamed us. So they went out publicly and lied. And our civil attorney said if they didn't do that, you wouldn't have a case. And there's a reason why we can't sue the FBI. Like, you can't sue law enforcement for doing a bad job and for treating you badly, because again, the law is in their favor. But the only reason we were able to was because they said what they said. And so it's sad and scary, because it wasn't just what they said publicly, it was everything else that re-victimized us and made our trauma that much worse. So it's just sad, because it makes you realize how often this is happening and they're just getting away with it.
And on top of that is Misty connecting Mueller to our case is the main reason why. If we were trying to contact civil attorneys, no one would call us back. Even if my brother would reach out to him, or his law school friends would reach out to people they knew, and they'd go like, well, how do you really know they didn't do this? Right. And they're like, I know them personally, like they did not do this. And they wouldn't even take our meetings. They wouldn't even entertain it. It was one firm that entertained it before Mueller's release, and they probably still wouldn't take our case because it's a high risk for them. So Mueller being connected to our case proved our innocence. It wasn't, as Doug put, we're not that we're not guilty, we're actually innocent. And then that puts so much more pressure and helped us. So that those are all these unique factors that, allow us to do that, which again, is scary. Everything's stacked to one side.
Yeah. And I think just to note, Misty is clearly a hero in this, but there are so many other heroes, and that doesn't come across as much, or if at all, in the docu-series. But I think reading the book, you'll see, our lawyers really are heroes. The fact that, they were getting criticized from their legal colleagues. Why would you take this case? Is this going to ruin your reputation? Why are you going out and standing, putting your neck on the line for these people when you don't know? And both of our attorneys were like, nope, we believe them. And this is why we do this. And we're going to go out there and we're going to fight them. And you see that in the press conferences that they give right at the time of the kidnapping and after I'm released, and how hard they go out there and fight for us. And Doug had, and that's another thing that's not on the docuseries, he had a 2-day-old baby that, and his wife, like another hero, just like, I'm a mom now, like 2 days after you come home from the hospital with your little baby, and your husband is helping a woman who's just like broken, and she's like, hon, I got it. Like, you help her. She needs it. Yeah. So there's just, as horrible as some of the other situations with people in law enforcement is, there's so many incredible moments with people along the way that, it's not all bad, but it takes a lot from a lot of different people to like get the next step and ultimately to get to where we are today. So
yeah, ultimately I see it as a book about the best of people and the worst of people, because you do see, I love that moment when I think you first met Doug, and then you hear someone ride off on a motorcycle and it's him.
Yeah. On a side note, Doug was really bummed that wasn't in the docuseries.
It should have been in the docuseries.
I know. He was like, oh, I didn't put the wheelie in. Well, it didn't fit. I guess it's just, but it's just, there are a lot of incredible moments that are hard to believe, but are really happened.
I'm so appreciative to you both, though, for speaking out about this. And something you said earlier really resonated with me, just about how in your position, you went through so much, but you were still able to fight it. And so what must people in more marginalized circumstances go through when they're up against something like this? I'm wondering, just speaking from a macro perspective, what can be done with law enforcement, big changes, big ideas in order to really truly embody more of a trauma-centric, trauma-focused. I mean, these are things I think you said it once in American Nightmare, Denise, just like, this is the fucking FBI. They should know better, pardon my French. Right. But it's like there's things that we know about that are just not being implemented here, and it just created just a horrific circumstances here. But like, what kind of safeguards and parameters could be deployed here to avoid situations like this?
I mean, it's hard because you'd think like that they do know better, because at least as with these documentaries coming out and these things being exposed, the public is becoming more aware. And I feel like in general, people know better, but it's true how it's implemented and how they're trained. They have these trainings. I think my understanding is that they do, but how that carries over into their belief system and how they handle cases is obviously there's a disconnect for some people. I think one thing that would be really helpful is more diversity in law enforcement, and specifically more female law enforcement and their perspectives.
Well, as far as interrogations, everything needs to be recorded, and that should be, you cannot have written statements. Not that they shouldn't write up reports, but you cannot have that be the sole decision maker. So everything should be recorded. The police shouldn't lie. They're gonna lie. The Supreme Court said it's okay for them to lie. That's most likely not going to happen, even though in every other developed country they do not allow police to lie. Law enforcement should be trained not to lie because it just makes for a lazy investigation. The traditional read technique needs to go away. There are better models, like the peace model, where it's more journalistic approach, and you are gathering information. The problem is that police decide if they're telling the truth or not, and that is not their job. Their job is to gather information, and they should be like, so if they're making decisions, if you're trustworthy or if you're telling the truth, they've already closed avenues of investigation. So if they went to going like the peace model, deciding I will gather information and go from there, instead of going like he crossed his arms, therefore he's being deceptive, or he looked to the left, so he's using the right side of his brain, that's a creative side, and that's not truthful. All this pseudoscience bullshit should just go away. And there are people advocating for this. There are law enforcement, there are officers who are implementing this. And probably more importantly, it needs to transition away from us versus them. You're either on one side of the thin blue line or the other, and that's not the case. We are not against law enforcement. We're for accountability, and I would hope other officers would be the same. And we should be looking at this as a global issue within our community, not we're on one side of the fence or the other, because we're not here just to say this is wrong. We want to help, and what's been encouraging is we've gotten people from law enforcement reaching out to us, saying that they become aware of this case, that they themselves are frustrated with it, and that means a lot when we hear from people who are doing the work day in, day out. It is a hard job. There's not no question about it, but they can do better, and we know that there's better results.
Absolutely. I mean, for me, it's like, how hard is it to be skeptical of everything but compassionate, and also check the evidence, look where the evidence goes. That's that wasn't done here. It was just immediately jump on Aaron and then immediately jump on you, Denise, when you were found. And it's like, it was an us versus them thing. And that's very clear in the book, just from the jump. And this is a question that I wanted to ask because the media played a huge role in what happened to you and in the public shaming that came afterwards. And I'm a reporter. I can be very idealistic about the media. Reading about stuff like this just makes me sick to my stomach because it was like almost like blood in the water and the sharks coming out almost. How can the media do better? That's almost too big a question to ask here because it just seems like everything went wrong with that. It was just taking the police at their word completely, not asking for additional context, not looking into things when people were getting emails. What are your thoughts about how the media in general can be more sensitive and frankly accurate around kind of media sensation cases like this.
One of the problems is the police or the media needs access to the police. So if they go against them, the police will shun them, and that hurts their careers. And in general, people like to believe in the institutions. The problem is they're not a megaphone for the police, and they need to get other sources. And also the way they wrote about this was, we did the hoax. There was no allegedly, or the police said, the framing was, this is set in stone. But then when Mueller is exposed as one of the perpetrators, it's like, he allegedly did this, he allegedly did that.
I mean, people are still reporting the alleged kidnapping. Like, the guy pled guilty both federally and state. There's all this evidence. It's not alleged. It's not an alleged assault. It fucking happened. So it's and even now with the popularity of the docu-series, people are still reporting the Gone Girl case. It's not the fucking Gone Girl case. I'm not Gone Girl. And if you read our book from start to finish, again, the docuseries is framed in a way to go, who done it? Oh my gosh, is she Gone Girl? And that's, we've had our own process of accepting how that's done, but it has the end point anyways. But at least with our book, you get to see from start to finish that there's really no similarity to Gone Girl at all. So having that kind of be connected to me, and that's what I'm known for the rest of my life, that's my legacy, is really sad. But I think that just taking a pause, it's, we live in the era of internet and clicks and likes and boom, boom, boom. I mean, even at our sentencing when Mueller was sentenced federally, and we spoke and gave our victim impact statement. I mean, the judge hardly cleared the court, and reporters were running out to report on it, so it's just the sensitivity, I think there's a dehumanization of stories and symbols of people rather than actual human beings and their suffering. And I just hope that moving forward, they can see that and try to implement that in their reporting a little bit more, and realize even if it's someone who did something wrong, they're still going through the worst moment of their life, and it's going to be magnified for the world to see. And it's sad and traumatic and shouldn't be laughed at and scoffed at and made as a joke. So,
and also, what's critically important for media to understand is if they cover a case, it increases the likelihood of a false accusation or wrongful conviction.
Right.
So even the chief of police for Vallejo in his deposition said, "Well, we're getting hounded by the media. We needed to tell them something." And the police are human, so he's like, "Let's say the thing that's easiest and get them off our backs." Now, he could just said the investigation's ongoing, but then he would have to field more questions. Now, he's not exactly that he is what he is. I'm not going to. But if media needs to understand, if they're covering a case, that increases the likelihood of blaming the people who are closest to the police. So I'm at the station, police are going like, "Well, he's probably did." They want quick answers, and the rush to judgment is a huge problem. And just because you're first doesn't mean you're right. And that's what we relied on journalists to do, is to investigate a little bit more, slow down, let the trolls on Twitter say that. It does not need to be journalists doing that.
Well said. And I get skeptical because I get jaded because I feel like I see this and I'm like, oh, Gone Girl's a big movie then. Let's loop that in. That's a better story than we don't really know what's going on and we're going to see what happens going forward. We're going to monitor this. It's in the rush to judgment, but also the rush to get the best story. A narrative arises and then the genie's out of the bottle. That can't be taken back. And people have a responsibility to really be careful about how they frame things. Even a headline can convey something.
Yeah.
It's subtle, but it leaves the reader or the viewer with an impression of these people are not to be trusted, or, and that's totally inappropriate when it's a breaking story and the facts are not known and things are not adding up.
And there's also social media. You wrote about how even you see your friends sharing articles about the case. And of course, other people are sharing articles. They're making comments. You're going out in public and just living your life and getting recognized and harassed, things like the Book of Mormon thing. What is it like to face that sort of harassment from strangers?
Gee,
it's horrible.
Yeah,
So,
it's like physically, we were faced with a life or death situation. We get out of it alive, and now we're completely exposed to God knows who and what. And, people reach out to you on social media and say the worst possible thing, death threats. You don't know who is going to think, well, I'm going to take this in my hands if the police aren't going to do anything and get justice by attacking us. So we just never fully felt safe. Along with that, we know the kidnappers are out there. We know that the police are trying to convict us and put us in jail. We didn't feel safe anywhere. And so that's it's like the modern day equivalent of throwing stones in the center of the town. It's just, we just were getting beaten left and right and still trying to heal and restore our lives. And we just felt sick, like literally just sick 100% of the time.
That's the hard part is in a digital age that if you were misrepresented, or defamed like we were back in the day, you can move towns, you can start over. Now you have a digital footprint. People can find you, and there is no escaping that. And if people just think at their own micro level, if someone spread a lie about you to your friends, how devastating that would be. And then to find out other people piling on, then to have people from around the world pile onto you, it's awful. It's a horrible experience, and it's stuff that people wouldn't say to your face. And I hope when people read our book and see the series that they stop their rush to judgment, because as we just mentioned, you can read a headline, get outraged, and then find that person and have your keyboard courage. But it's more important to say, hey, I don't know enough about this. And why am I going to get out of this? And maybe if I remember, hey, there was a case back in 2015 where they said it was all made up, and that was wrong. I should just hold off and say, I don't know enough, and I don't need to add to any more suffering. Hopefully that's a lesson that people get from our book.
Yeah, it's very beautifully said and also beautifully put in the book. And just this kind of idea that, not everyone needs to weigh in on everything. And as you said, you could see something and be understandably upset of oh, this person must have done a horrible thing. And then a few years later, it turns out, no, they didn't. It was a lie. And you've gone and added to their pain and looking back, how can you be proud of yourself after doing something like that? What
people put more energy into love and empathy and supporting other humans rather than, I get there's news reports of things that are devastating and it makes sense to feel outraged about it. But what do you do with that outrage? Are you going to then, go on the computer and attack? Maybe hold back from that and put the energy of love out there. And I think that could really go far if more of us do.
Absolutely. One thing I'm curious about is, the documentary's out now. A lot of people are talking about it. Actually, we've gotten a lot of, contact from people who are either in true crime or even in law enforcement who are talking about how appalled they are about what you went through. But there's also this idea that, by putting yourselves out there, is that re-traumatizing at all? And how do you balance taking care of yourselves at a time like this with also trying to advocate for others and put out your story so that other people can understand this better? So how do you balance that?
We are still figuring it out. Yeah. It's complicated. It's tricky. We've had just a huge outpouring of love and support right now with the docu-series. It's just incredible. and it's still exposing and leaves us a little vulnerable. And for me, physically, my body doesn't know how to differentiate the two things. So my body is still processing a lot of that deep trauma, and we're having a hard time sleeping, and I feel sick and can't really eat. But thank God we have each other to lean on. Thank God we have our two sweet little girls. Like what a gift to just pull yourself out of some of this stuff and just see really life in action, pure joy and silliness. So that's certainly a help. And our friends and family have always been a huge help to lean on, so we're just, so we're just trying to figure it out. But
And we're both physical therapists. We're working again, and our patients, helping our patients is helpful for us, because so much the last few years have been like about us and what we went through, and you start feeling like it's always about you in a way, and like, are you helpful to other people, or are you like too broken? In this case, like now people, we're 9 years removed, but it's still a lot of exposure. So being able to go work and help someone else and do that and get like a good way to compartmentalize this a little bit is helpful, because that's what we originally connected as, like our like love for this profession and all it entails. And so being able to do that to something we trained a long time and worked hard to do is rewarding and helpful in this. But like as Denise to say, it's been a lot, and overwhelmingly positive. It's just a lot. So it's that's just a lot.
And of course, another way you're helping people, frankly, just by sharing your story. And again, I can't recommend the book highly enough. I know there's people out there who've seen the docu-series and might have questions, and they might want more details, and it's all in the book. And you have complete control of the narrative. It's very helpful. And you've been talking about how healing is a process and that you're still working on it. I wonder if you'd have any words of advice to people who've gone through traumatic episodes also and may not be as far along in that healing process as you guys are.
I think it's always important to remember there is hope, and it's not a straight line forward. There's going to be triggers. Some of my first triggers happened 9 months after the kidnapping, and part of it was helpful to have a therapist to consult with, because it scared me. Like, shouldn't I be getting better? She was telling me too that, this is actually part of the healing. You were in shock for these 9 months. You needed to get your life in order. And now that you have stability in your life, your body is able to finally process it. Just having that awareness and understanding was like, okay, phew, I'm not losing my mind. And you start to learn in time what triggers you, what makes you feel safe and unsafe. And then you can start to shape things and enter situations that might be a little triggering in a way that you can start to develop strategies to manage it, finding things that just to help ground you and give you joy. Nature was a big thing, and music, and our professions, trying to find ways to help other people. There was art. I was painting for a little while and expressing myself creatively, writing to process it. So I think there's so many wonderful ways to find healing and therapy, and it's kind of a trial and error. Some things worked back then, other things work better now. So it's a constantly, a evolving thing. And I think the biggest thing for people is to always believe in yourself. There's plenty of times where I'm like, I can't do this. I can't handle this. Like, I don't know how to move forward. And what's really special about being human is we're incredibly resilient. And if you can find love and support from other people to help give you strength in your times of weakness, and it's okay to have a bad day. It's okay not be okay. That was a big learning thing. I could probably talk for a long time about it, but those are just some things.
Therapy was tremendously helpful, and having someone who has expertise to help give you some perspective, that's definitely like a must, I would say. And yeah, it's a very windy road. And as Dean's saying, it's, some days it's just a bad day and that's okay. And then other days might start off poorly and kind of just get the engine going. And then you find a little bit of that joy. It's going to come in little waves. And if you can kind of latch on to that, like that little moment, and try to expand that little by little, we'll start resetting. And I work with a lot of clients who had chronic pain, decades of chronic pain. That's its own debilitation, and it negatively has a major impact on them. So we talk a lot about the most important story is the story you tell yourself, and that story can always be rewritten and edited, and things that maybe work can get cut out or revised because that worked for that period of time, but doesn't mean it needs to work forever. And so we just try to rewrite the story in different ways.
Absolutely. It has been so wonderful to talk to you both. I'm wondering, is there anything we didn't ask about or that you wanted to get into that we didn't really cover enough, that you wanted to mention or stress, or you think it's important for our listeners to understand going forward?
I think we talked about.
Yeah, we covered most. Yeah. I appreciate you asking about the healing part. That's really important for us to discuss.
I just realized I said love and support like maybe 5. But
what it's about.
Yeah. No, we appreciate it. Like, those are very thoughtful questions. Really appreciate that.
Thank you so much. I mean, it was an incredibly thoughtful book, and we just appreciate that you are putting yourselves out there and speaking on these issues, because they're ultimately maybe some of the most important issues within true crime and sort of policing, law enforcement, our justice system, how we treat people in those processes. And I think this gets at the heart of a lot of problems. And I'm so sorry for what you went through, but I'm also just so grateful that you shouldn't have had to be this strong to go through this and then keep doing this work and talking about it. But I'm very appreciative that you are. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We really appreciate that. And we felt, and Denise and I have obviously thought about this over the years, but we knew what our case represented are some themes that seem almost more in the zeitgeist now than they were in 2015. I think there's a more awareness and more of a viewer appetite to see some changes in how some of the stuff is presented, and people are just more aware of some of these systemic flaws. So we're just trying to do our best to keep that going forward.
We want to sincerely thank Denise and Aaron for not only speaking to us, but for writing Victim F and putting into words the trauma they went through in the hopes of eliciting change from law enforcement and protecting other survivors. We would really strongly recommend reading Victim F, so you can get that wherever you buy your books, and we'll be including a link in our show notes. I'd say it's required reading for anyone who's interested in American Nightmare.
Thanks so much for listening to The Murder Sheet. If you have a tip concerning one of the cases we cover, please email us at murdersheet@gmail.com. If you have actionable information about an unsolved crime, please report it to the appropriate authorities.
If you're interested in joining our Patreon, that's available at www.patreon.com/murdersheet. If you want to tip us a bit of money for records requests, you can do so at www.buymeacoffee.com/murdersheet. We very much appreciate any support.
Special thanks to Kevin Tyler Greenlee, who composed the music for The Murder Sheet, and who you can find on the web at kevintg.com.
If you're looking to talk with other listeners about a case we've covered, you can join the Murder Sheet discussion group on Facebook. We mostly focus our time on research and reporting, so we're not on social media much. We do try to check our email account, but we ask for patience as we often receive a lot of messages. Thanks again for listening.